Hi, welcome to the next edition of three meta decks that we're going to talk about that's budgetized. And like I said, the objective of the series is to get you into Arena on an Explorer, Pioneer, and eight rares for four mythics. Rest are common and uncommons. Today, like I said, I got you three decks. So we have a few, probably more weeks of this, and then we'll get into non-meta decks, which I'll just try to brew some spicy decks that I think are quite competitive in the current format that might get you interested. But if you like this series, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe, hit that bell notification so go for future videos. We're on our way to 1,000 subs. Help me get monetized on this channel. I would be very much appreciated for the New Year's or the holiday season. Let's get into the three decks and discuss. So first is Mono Red Wizard. Now this is a deck that's been around in Pioneer for a while. It gets its 5-0s and it falls on and off. Overall, it's probably more known as Mono Red Prowess. Now, the new cards we're picking up make this deck even better. We did cut back on the Monstrous Rages. I do understand it's a good card, but at the same time, it's very risky in a format with high amounts of removal. If we can get around that and get the same amount of damage output, we should probably consider doing that. And we are, right? We are more of a traditional stock burn list. We have Bolt Wave plus some skewers, some light up the stages, some bursts, play with fire. Lightning, Wizard's Lightning, so the deck is very consistent at getting its damage across. For turn 1, our most optimal plays are a turn 1 Kamanu. Now, we do get some not as great lands. We have to cut our Den of the Bugbear, and also a few like Sakistan, Castle Ambrith, and other kind of rare lands for utility, but we still get 15 Mountains and 4 Rampant Ruins. We have a total of 10 Wizards, with 2 Lava Runners, 2 Force Mages, 4 Show Off. So those are our two sets of rares. Show Off is a card that sees play in multiple decks. So it definitely is a nice investment if you're going to invest in a non-land card. Soulscar Mage sees play in some variants, but most of the time it's some sort of aggro Prowess shell. Same with Prowess, Swiftspear. So Lava Runner, you kind of actually get this by default, so you don't actually have to invest in anything into this because you get it in the Foundations packs. Sideboard, though, we have some in the festivities. It's like the best one-drop mini sweeper you have access to. It doesn't affect your board. Deals a bunch of damage. With Soulscar Mage, it's Nig counter, so it's kind of nice. It kills elves, which is very problematic. We have 3 red cat melees to get rid of red creatures. Mainly you want to hit red stuff, so Rakdos Prowess. Nice sideboard card for that. Same with Torch the Tower. Getting rid of exiling a mouse is quite relevant because it has a dice trigger. We have 4 Ringing Volleys. Solid sideboard card. Like I said, all these cards you probably will end up playing anyways for quite some time. So there's a lot of flexibility here to upgrade the mana base first because you're really kind of, desired for that, right? The only thing you might want to add in the board is Screaming Nemesis over the Skullcracks. That's basically really it. This rest of the sideboard is pretty spot on. You could play some cases. That is, I think, a card you start out with. We have 4 Ringing Volleys. Pretty solid card. Answers, a lot of the most problematic threats, spirits, the Selesnya Coco decks, etc. We have Skullcrack. That's our burn spell that prevents life gain. It's pretty much all it's used for. So if you're facing angels, you bring it in. If you're facing any kind of deck like that, definitely bring it in. Frenzy is our removal for bigger threats like Shieldred. So if you're facing a black deck with Shieldred, probably want to bring this in. It can answer the threat. Most of the time, it costs 1 red. When we attack out with our threats, just smack something and get in there for lethal. So it's a pretty straightforward deck. It's basically mono red burn, right? So if you want to pick up a deck that you think that you could, for one, you could easily get your dailies, right? This is just mono red. So if you have a mono red daily, just play this. You should be good. So next on my list, we still have 2 more decks to talk about. Next of which is probably in the least meta percentage wise right now, but let's get into that one. So next is Boros Heroic. Now our slots here is all lands. So if you want to pick up this deck, it's actually making you invest correctly. Pretty much in my opinion, the best thing you could do is invest in your mana bases because you could easily swap out the inner workings of these cards. As long as you have a good mana base, you should be able to do a lot of different things in Boros. But we don't really take that many hits here. Hoplite is the 4 of in the Heroic deck. Swiftspear, Virtuosa, these are all stock. So Clever Luminancer isn't really seeing a lot of play in this deck, but it's not a terrible substitute. You could also play the 0-4 if you really wanted to with Heroic, but I like having least amount of heroic cards because you kind of need your cards to target these two. You want these two just to get buffs for doing that. We have our courage to help get our stuff through, get them bigger, and have vigilance against aggro. That's very relevant. Anger gives it trample, draws a card. Defiant strike, instant speed, combat trick, draws a card. Lauren escape, and Shard Mage's rescue are ways to help give our stuff hexproof when they try to target and remove it. Monstrous Rage, since we are a creature-oriented deck, and we want stuff targeting our stuff, Rage is much better than Burn, so we're going to be playing it. We have 2 Rages main, one side. This is a nice removal spell that targets our threats, gets counters, and kills their threat. We have 1 and 2 on the MDFCs. I believe some of these are actually common now. I think Shajari's Shelter is a common, so it's a little bit cheaper. But like I said, we do have Inspiring Vantage and the Foundry. These are our rares. We have Carnival. It's just the best cycle for common lands. If you don't have access to all of these, pick them up. They're common. There's no reason not to play them. 3 and 3 on basic. So definitely want to invest in your mana base before getting into your sideboard. Sideboard, we have Infusion. This is necessary mainly against Rakdos Prowess, and here's the reason. This deck does struggle to necessarily to get a 1-drop always on turn 1, because your removal suite, like Reckless Rage and Shelter by Ghost, even though they are good in that matchup, they require a 1-drop creature to be able to play them on turn 2, and you kind of need to answer their threat on turn 2. So having Flowstone Infusion is a nice card. It gets rid of their mouse. Also, it can make it where your creature gets +2/-2. So it's a nice little combat trick. We have Lantern of the Lost. Normally you play Rest in Peace. Solids, we don't really care about our graveyard besides Homestead Courage. So that's not that big of a deal. We'd rather draw a card while exiling all cards. Light of Hope. Solid card. This card does see play in the actual finalized list of Boros Heroic. Especially against something like Control, where you need to be able to answer their lockdowns, portable holes. Actually, this doesn't answer portable hole, but lockdowns is quite important because most of the time on turn 3, they'll sweep away your board. You want to be able to answer that. And if almost fails, you gain a little bit of life against aggro. You put a counter on your thing. It's all Gucci. Destroy Evil. Normally this is Get Lost. So this is a little bit of a hit, but we still get to answer enchantments while also killing a mid-sized threat like a Shieldred. Pretty reasonable against black decks, and gets rid of Anax. Keep that in mind because that is one of the best decks in the format. So you do want access to pretty good enchantment removal. Magebane Lizard. This card is essentially for Phoenix, Lotus Field, and stuff like that. The goal of the card is you play it on turn 2. They cast a bunch of instant sorceries. They take 1 damage incrementally based on how many spells they cast that turn. So it does disincentivize them from actually getting back their Phoenixes, or they just take what? 1, 2, 6 damage to get back a Phoenix. If you have multiple of these, they stack. It's a 1/4, so it doesn't get answered by Impulse, which is kind of nice. Then we have Shelter by Ghost. This is for Rakdos Prowess, other aggro decks. It gives your thing lifelink, which is quite nice, and it makes your stuff harder to kill with the Ward 2. So that's kind of nice. Now, for our grindy matchups, we have Sun Blessed Healer. It's a 2-mana, 3/1 with kicker of 1 in white as lifelink. Not really relevant, but it does ETB. You get to give it back a Virtuosa, get back your Hoplites. Keep in mind, if you're facing Phoenix, protect your Hoplites. All their removal is damage-based. So you definitely want to make sure, if you're picking up this deck, you need to keep that in your head, that you need to prioritize Hoplite safety against Phoenix over your other threats. Yeah, you want to keep Virtuoso alive because it can close out the game very fast. But they can't really answer Hoplite because of the fact that if you target it, it gets a counter and prevent all damage that would be dealt to it this turn. And if it's a red-based deck, all the removal is based off damage. So keep that in mind. But this is basically our equivalent of the 3-drop that is a rare. That ETBs, you get a 2-drop, put it back, can't attack or block. This is a nice substitute for that. It is 4 mana, so it's 1 mana more expensive, but it's an uncommon, so it's much more friendly, budget friendly. Normally in this slot, you're playing Showdown the Scalds, so that way you could draw 4 and buff your guys a little bit for the next few turns. So we are cutting some decent rares here for control and mid-range for this Sunblessed Healer, but it's a reasonable pickup. You're not going to be upset that you're playing this card. And actually, I think you start with this card. So I don't think you're even investing wild cards into it. That is the second list that I have to talk about for you guys today. I want to know in the comment section what you guys think about these lists as we move along. Next list is going to be different. It's not aggro-oriented. Pseudo. It's not really oriented. It's a little bit more of a combo-ish deck. So like the first deck, like I said, burn heavy. This deck is more attacker aggressiveness. The last deck is more of a combo aggressive. So let's get into it. So next on my list is Orzhov Fang. Normally this is Mardu or Abzan. So keep that in mind. We are taking a huge hit when it comes to card quality of filling up the yard. Now, I think this is a solid investment. You could pivot either direction because for the most part, I think most builds could play in format. It's not a bad investment here. I think it's also a common. You really care about investing in your Grease Fang and your Parhelion. So these are your two primary investments. Those are our rares. We have Ashiok. Not a bad card to invest in. It makes it where you mill 4 cards, exile their graveyard. That's a nice little main board hate piece. We have 4 Duresses. That's our Thoughtseize. So when you pick up Thoughtseizes, eventually, just replace them. Put the Duresses on the board. You won't be really mad. Duress is just good. So we have Lively Dirge as our two of. So this card is mainly here because we could pay 3 mana and we could tutor and dump a Parhelion in the yard. Or we could pay 4 mana and pick up a Fang and put it into play so we can get a Parhelion in the yard into play and attack. We also could pay 5 to throw the Parhelion in the yard, get back a Fang. You cash the Grift. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. This deck is pretty easy to get across. Now, for our vehicles. So we do take a hit here, right? Normally, this deck plays 2 copies of Sky Sovereign. Instead, we're playing Thundersteel Colossus. This is still a decent-sized body. It's a 7/7 Trampler that will have haste. The advantage here is you can still crew it with Grease Fang, attack for 7. I'm not going to be upset with that. The other one, instead of something like Copter or Chariot, you're going to have a Bomat Bazaar Barrage. It's 4 mana, 5/5, ETBs, draws a card, crews 3. Again, you can use Fang to crew it, so you can get it back, crew, attack, draw a card. It's not a terrible vehicle. I think it's one of the better ones you have options to, in my opinion. If you have any other suggestions for this slot, let me know. But a lot of the better vehicles all are crew like 6, 7. So you can't even really crew it with a Fang. So it's not really that great. So you want to have good cards that you could crew. 4 is max. Because, well, Fang is a 4 power guy. So I think this is a reasonable threat. It's basically our Ezekiel's Chariot. It's a 4-drop, comes down, draws a card. You're not going to be mad that you're playing this, but you definitely want to improve this whenever you can. Colossus might be a little bit better than the Barrage, but I don't want to have too many 7-drops. So I'd rather have 2 and 4, so I think that's more optimal. You could do 3 and 3, just because this is a common, this is an uncommon. It's up to you. Fatal Push is a premier removal spell. You're not going to be mad that you're investing in this. Bitter Triumph, pretty good removal. Allows you to pitch a Parhelion or your vehicles. Corpse Churn, mills a little bit, returns a Fang. We have Vermin Supplier for a little self-mill. And we have Informant to pitch, draw a card, and pitch a vehicle. Sideboard, we do have Queen to Dust for a little bit of graveyard hate, plus 3 Go Blink. Go Blink's also pretty reasonable against combo and control. We have Dark Betrayal, a nice way to answer an opposing Fang. Also answers, a Shieldred. Primarily, a lot of the best decks in the format are black. So just having something that's 1 mana, destroy target black creature, pretty good overall. Deafening Silence is our answer for Lotus Field. Plus we have Damping Sphere for it too. So we have a way to answer that deck as a whole. But Deafening Silence also is for the Phoenix matchup because they cast a lot of instances and sorceries to be able to get back their Phoenixes. We have Raven Feeblement for white-based decks. So like Angels. It's nice to be able to answer a 2/4 for 1 mana. Damping Sphere, like I said, it's mainly for... You could also bring it in against green, but, it's not as great against green as it is against Lotus Field. Destroy Evil, solid, answers enchantment, so Annex, answers the 6/6 Demon, answers, pretty much anything in that matchup. We have Fracture, answers enchantments, artifacts, and planeswalkers. It's not a bad spell to have access to in your sideboard. A Go for the Throat, additional removal spell for aggro, and like I said, Go Blink. Is our graveyard hate plus, discard effect. So that's the 3 decks that I have to talk about today. Hopefully I did a good coverage. Like I said, my goal is to try to hit as many meta decks as I can and address them. Like I said, I couldn't target Mardu or Abzan Fang because for one, 3-color decks in a budget like this just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I have to reduce it back to a 2-color deck to make it actually function. But next week, I think, I'm not sure what I'm going to be targeting next. But I am, like I said, next week will be another set of 3. By the time this premieres, you probably actually see the premiere for that video. So make sure you come back, subscribe, hit that bell notification, so that way you can be alerted for all future videos like this one. And until next time, hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you guys next time.